and welcome to Logan Sounds Off, where I talk about books, music, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Logan Kelly. Hello, and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I am interviewing somebody very, very interesting, Ed Smith of Today FM Rocks. How are you today?
I'm very well, Logan. It's great to talk to you. A real honor.
That's brilliant. So for starters, for those who have watched my interviews before, people know that I like to start off with the first question. For those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So as you say, my name is Ed Smith. I am a radio presenter on Today FM, handily, considering it's a radio station. I've been with the company for for 24 years now at this stage, in various capacities, in various roles, and behind various shows. Currently, I am the presenter of Today FM Rocks, which is on from 10 until midnight, Sunday through to Thursday. You can also listen to it on a brand new rock channel called Today FM Rocks, handily enough again, on the Today FM app. And then in the last couple of months, I've started a new podcast called Recorded History. Not too dissimilar to your own podcast, I'd imagine, where you go through people's lives by way of the 3 albums that have come to mean the most to them. So we've just put out episode 12 with Mr. Niall Horan, and it's going, I hope, quite well. I'm really enjoying it. Doing those interviews for that length was something that I was a little nervous about, because the most and the longest I would have spoken to somebody for my show would have been about 7 or 8 minutes. And even with that, you're given, just talk about the new album. You're very specific about what you need to talk to, but getting to talk to people about the kind of getting into the deep and meaningfuls about their life experiences from childhood to present times was a little daunting, but so far it's worked out really well. Yeah.
That's actually brilliant. That's why, sorry, I tapped the microphone in there. That's why I love podcasts, because they can tell stories and there's no time limit on them.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Exactly. So next question I have for you, and I'm going to start off very early when you were a child. So who influenced you musically growing up? What kind of music did you listen to? And did people inspire you to listen to different types of music?
I think, yes, good question. I think as a small child, before I was able to exert my own, I suppose, influence on my own musical destiny, I would have been surrounded by, I grew up in a pub in North Cork, so we would have had a trad session each and every weekend. So there was a lot of trad knocking around the house. And then my mother was a big country and western fan, which I am still to this day. And then my father loved Elvis and the rock and roll of the 50s. So I had a nice smorgasbord there of various influences, even before I started, I suppose, flexing my own taste buds. And then when I hit that vital age, when you get into music, when I was like early to mid-teens, I fell in love very much with REM, were a big band for me. That was the first album I ever bought, was Out of Time, with my own, well, I was going to say my own money. It wasn't. It was my father's £10 note. I can't claim that far. But so from then, it started a love affair, I suppose, not just with that band, but the independence, when you're trying to exert your own presence and your own personality on the world, to do so through music was a very handy way and an easy way, I suppose, to kind of express yourself. And when you're trying to find your own identity, to latch onto a band and get into them in a real deep way, as is the case for teenagers for hundreds of years, I can imagine, or even specifically for the last 10 or 15 or 50, 60 years, that the music you love and listen to is a huge part of growing up. So it definitely was the case for me. So yeah, and then I was coming up through the grunge era, the classic grunge era of like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, then into the mid-90s. It was, to my mind, the 90s, and I'll say this with bias, is one of the greatest decades of music of all time. So I was very lucky to be coming up through Britpop, grunge, some of the early dance pioneers as well. And then towards the end of the 90s, things were changing towards Radiohead. So it was all there for me. And REM, of course, were a constant throughout. So I feel I was very lucky at the time I was coming up through my musical beginnings, because there was such a rich amount and such a fertile time for music that you didn't have to look far to get some great bands.
I think you're completely right, and I can agree that the 90s decade was
Yeah,
definitely
it was
one
special.
of
Yeah.
the best
Mm.
decades in music history. So my next question, when you were a kid, because a lot of people in houses with their families listen to the radio, what introduced you to the radio growing up?
Yeah, going back to how I grew up or where I grew up, I suppose physically, it was a pub, a rural pub in North Cork. So my father would have had the radio on in the pub all day, every day. My father was a real radio fan as well. So anywhere we went in the house, there was, the telly was on in the sitting room, but invariably the first thing you did when you woke up in the morning, you'd hear the radio went on. Gay Byrne was on before we went to school. And then when we were being picked up for national school, it would have been Marion Finucane doing Live Line. And then in the evenings, you'd hear the radio on in the lounge in the pub, which provided a little background noise. He maybe had a scatter of 5 or 6 customers. So he'd put on Radio 1, there'd be some country music stations on. Then my mother would tune into a lad called Pascal Mooney, who I don't know if even he's still alive. I'm hoping he's still alive anyway. But he had a country music show on, so that would go on. And then one of my keenest memories of radio was when my father would shut the pub, and my bedroom was above the lounge, so I could hear everything through the floorboards. And you just got used to it, but he would put on the BBC World Service every night at around 11:30, 11:45, and they play a song, I'm assuming they still do, called Sailing By. It's a beautiful piece of music, and that would come on in and around just before midnight every night, and I'd hear it through the floorboards. And that was kind of my signal to go, Dad's winding up now, he's going to be going to bed soon, and I'd drift off myself to the sound of the BBC World Service. So I became a bit of a radio. I became a bit of a radio nerd at a very young age. I would, at 7, 8, 9, all the way up to your own age, 11, that I had constantly a radio in my room, and I'd have it under the duvet. And I remember my mother had come back from hospital. She had these really dreadful pair of earphones that were given to her. Only one was working, but it just managed to fit in. And I'd have one of these little plastic earbuds in my ear, and I'd go on to long wave, and I'd flick around to Radio Luxembourg, or Virgin was just starting off then, a guy called James Whale. So all these shock jock talk radios, then I'd flick around and get as far as maybe Mexico, or this is when long wave was a real, and you could just about pick them up. And I'd be fascinated to hear how the other radio stations did it. And then I'd listen to my favorite show at the time, even as an 8-year-old, was Late Date with the late great, he only passed away recently, actually, Val Joyce. So that was really a very formative experience for me, and forming my, I suppose, approach to putting shows together much later in life, 20, 30 years down the line. Kind of very eclectic mix that he would put on. You wouldn't know what to expect. And for me, that was the kind of essence of good radio, that it wasn't predictable. You'd hear one song from one artist, and he'd flip it to a completely different genre for the next. You go, oh, where are we going with this? So it was, it was unpredictable, but at the same time, you could always rely on him to put together a great show. So that was, so from a very early age, I was surrounded by radio. So the love has been there since I was very small.
So what was your first radio job? That's my question, actually.
Yes. So I did communications and specialized in broadcasting in Angel Street DIT, but I actually fell into radio by accident, as such that a friend of mine was producing a presenter called Phil Cawley, still going strong down the southeast. He was on the afternoons, and she got me into Today FM. Today FM used to do market research. So they'd get a lot of young people in the evenings when everyone had left the office to cold call people. It's crazy you think about it now. So you'd get a survey. So I say I'd ring you or your dad, whoever, and then they go, hello, this is la 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 la. Would you have 2 minutes to spare for a quick survey? Now, invariably, most people would slam the phone down or tell you where to go. But it's every now and then, every 1 in 3 maybe would answer. So you'd ask them questions about what time they listen to the radio, and then play them songs. Are you tired of this? Are you sick of it? La la la. And then they'd use that research. They'd correlate the figures and use that to kind of inform the music on the playlist, how the shows were doing. Now, how accurate it was, I don't know, but what it did serve was to get me in the door. So I became a supervisor of that team. And then Today FM at that time, 99, 2000, 99, yeah, it was a really up and coming, burgeoning, fertile, and exciting time. Things were happening for the station. It was doing quite well. It was picking up momentum. There was jobs popping up at that. And so I was very lucky to be around when they needed people to do, handout hearings at Crossroads at 7 a.m, or can you man the front desk? And I just said yes to everything. And before I knew it, then I was working in the music department with a great man called Brian Adams. He was the head of music. So I worked with him for a couple of years and then progressed to work on different shows, like the Ray Darcy show. I worked with Tom Dunn and Pet Sounds. And then, Tom Dunn from News Talk. Yeah. He was with Today FM for years. Great show in the evenings, Pet Sounds from 7 to 10. Then when Paul McClune took that over, I stayed on with the show. And then after a while, the boss man brought me in and said, look, you're going to have to, what are you going to do? You just can't be doing these. And I was like, oh gosh. And I just said, oh, I'd love my own show, thinking that would get him off my tail. He says, okay. I could not believe it. He goes, well, come back to me and we'll start you next week. And so my life changed really within the matter of about 7 or 8 minutes. So then I started a show called Ed's Indie Disco, which went really well. Thank God. It was just 2 hours of indie classic bangers like your Oasis, your Pulps, your Stone Roses. And that was a big success, thank God. And then that moved to Sunday to different time slots. And then I present different cover shifts. And then I got Songs of Praise. I had Songs of Praise on Sunday. That ran for years. And that then turned into the show I'm on now, which is Today FM Rocks. So I've always kind of been in the kind of indie rock, alternative, non-daytime schedule playlist corner of the field, which I'm still doing to this day, thankfully.
Which is actually amazing.
Yeah.
And I like those little shows late in the evening where they're non-daytime kind of shows because it's very interesting to listen to them. Yeah. So I want to ask, do you have a favorite thing about the show?
The show, I think, the current one, again, it's a lot of the bands I play would be bands I'd like myself. So how would I say this diplomatically? Maybe some of the other presenters wouldn't have that luxury of playing stuff on their shows as much as that they like as much as I do. So I'm very lucky in that regard that I get to play REM, I get to play Nirvana, I get to play Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, a lot of the bands that I grew up with. So it's always great that when you're fully behind and you're enjoying the music you're playing, that's such a bonus and such a gift. And I think at that time of the night, people, I don't tend to talk for too long between the songs. So I just kind of build up that relationship with the listener. I let the songs do most of the work. Because I don't think people at that time at 10 p.m. want to hear me waffling on. They just want to hear some great songs. And I'm in a really great position, very fortunate that for 2 hours every night, 5 nights a week, I hit them with some of the greatest rock bands of all time. So it's I'm very, very lucky. Yeah.
That was an amazing answer. And I want to move on to something a bit different. Okay. Which is your podcast that you spoke about at the start. And I wanted to ask, how did Recorded History come to you, or did you go to it?
We kind of met each other in the middle. So there's a company within the company. It's called Go Loud. They're a kind of podcast publishing house within Bauer, within the setup, the umbrella of the whatever corporate setup is there, that they had Recorded History in place about a year before I took it on. And the presenter that they had lined up recorded one episode, but then she left the country. Nothing to do with the podcast, but she emigrated. And they had it on the shelf. And then I was talking to my friend Dee, who was working for Go Loud at the time. And she goes, we're out for a drink. And she just looked at me and went, do you know what? Because I was kind of speaking to her about, I'd love to, spread my wings a little bit. The show was great and all, but, it's time to kind of push my comfort boundaries a little bit. She goes, I have the very thing for you. I've been looking for somebody that would fit this. And I asked her to explain it to me. I said, that sounds great. And I said, yeah, okay. So she spoke, it's sponsored by therecordhub.com. And she spoke to those people, and then they got back, oh my God, we'd love to have Ed Smith on board. It was that straightforward, Logan. It was very, I've been very lucky that I've been in the right time, right place at the right time for so many of these opportunities that I've gotten and there was a slight delay in it for various reasons. And then we finally got it up and running 3 or 4 months ago. And I had recorded a few in the bag just to make sure I was ahead of myself. And now it's my weekly thing is to kind of, I work with a wonderful woman called Alison Healy, who looks after a lot of the kind of social media side of things. That's such a massive and important part, as you know yourself, to get the promotion and the
Yeah.
marketing of the podcast out. I am pretty useless at that side of things. So she's a genius. So each podcast is recorded on video. She'll clip it, use that for promotional purposes, she'll time and schedule all the tweets about it. And so I don't have to worry about any of that. So what I do have to worry about is making sure that I got enough research done. And then when they send me their list of albums, I make sure to listen to the albums, because sometimes between you and me, I may not have heard the album that they're talking about. It happened today. It happened today. In fact, there was a wonderful artist called Amy, and the 3 albums, I think I'd only heard 2 of the 3 ever in my life. So I had to get to listening, and it was great because it was a really good album, thank God. But so I'm really enjoying that side of things. And then, as you know yourself, when you're talking to people, it's trying to find that rhythm and trying to get them relaxed and to open up without being too pushy. So it's a learning process as I go along. But as I said before, asking people to just talk about themselves through their music choices. And again, it's not about the coolest albums of all time, or it's not about the greatest albums. It's just the albums that mean the most. And that has proven to be a lovely way for people to open up and discuss their lives in a new and fresh and different way than what they're used to. So getting some very memorable, incisive, and sometimes moving and hilarious moments that people kind of, even during the interview, they're going, God, I never thought of it that way, or forgotten about that thing that happened. And so it's great that music is such a soundtrack to so many of the great moments and big and pivotal moments in our life, that invariably, not for all moments, but there'll be a song or an album that will bring you back there. So that's what the whole point and purpose of the podcast Recorded History is to get people to reflect and on their lives by way of the soundtracks of those moments. Yeah.
That's you're blowing me away, Ed, with these answers. They're so deep and
I know. I
intense.
need to. I listen to myself sometimes, Logan. Oh my God!
I'm trying to keep up.
Don't. You're doing a great job.
And now I know the answer to this.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know I have an opinionated answer to this.
Good.
So I'm gonna ask you now to see what you
Right.
think. The difference between radio and podcasting. What do you find are the biggest differences between the two?
I think the differences is, in no particular order of importance, is you have to start with the listener and how they're engaging with content as such. It's all about content now, but if you look at a radio listener, it's, for the most part, it's background. So you're maybe getting up in the morning, getting ready for work, getting the kids ready for school, or you're on the way to the gym, or you're on the bus, you're on the commute. It's there to provide a distraction. It's there to provide some musical backdrop to whatever you're doing, be it at work or cleaning the kitchen or doing some gardening or whatever you're doing. And the same in the evenings. That's why drive time and breakfast are the 2 biggest and most important parts of any radio schedule, that it's there to keep you company for those moments. But I think with a podcast, people will download a podcast and get into a series with a very different approach to how they engage with that content, in so much as that they will listen to it from beginning to end. So with radio, people are a little bit more fickle. They can turn it off or skip around a little bit more readily because they may have heard that song previously, or the phone rings, so they just turn the radio down and they'll slip back into that slipstream quite easily. So, but for a podcast listener, I think they're a lot more engaged with it, and they are more willing to stick it out for a longer period of time. As you mentioned earlier, the great thing about podcasts is that you're not stuck to, oh, we've only got 10 minutes, and you're really getting into just about at minute 7, you're just getting into a really interesting part of the conversation. So sorry, I've got to wrap it up. Whereas with a podcast, you can let the conversation flow and develop. So it's, I think, without sounding too pretentious, it's a lot more organic and natural And I think people that you're interviewing, you'll have found this as well, because you have a lot more podcasts under your belt than I do. But I think when given the time and breathing space and the less pressurized environment of a podcast, people will act accordingly and maybe be a bit more open and think about their answers. They're under a bit of a different kind of pressure. So I think the way people engage with podcasts is the real main difference. And you have the time in post-production to fix things, and you can edit out mistakes. And once people know that you can take out a mistake, or if they stumble or get a name wrong, which happened today when the interviewee forgot the name of a song, I can just say, don't worry about it, we'll start again, and I can just take it out. She goes, oh my God, thank God. Yeah. So that kind of stuff puts them at their ease. So I think the real difference lies in how people listen, and they're much more willing to stick through and listen through from beginning to end. Whereas at radio, you can jump around and be, not that people don't enjoy radio, but I think they do listen to it in a little bit more of a, not fickle way, but they'll tune in and out as life happens. But with a podcast, it's an engagement to listen. So you've made that an appointment to listen, I should say. So you've made that appointment for yourself. You're going to set aside the time to really listen, as opposed to radio where you can just let it flow through your ears. And unless it's maybe the current affairs show like The Last Word, that's why interviews on The Last Word would only be about 7 or 8 minutes, because people, you got to keep it moving. You got to keep it moving to the next thing, and that's why songs are 3.5. That's a radio song would be 3.5, 4 minutes, because any longer than that, you're gonna lose people. Whereas in podcasts, no, it's okay. You can just relax and trust them that they're going to stick with you for the 30, 40, or even some cases like Joe Rogan. My God, it's 3 hours. Sometimes these episodes are crazy long, which would be too long for me now. But he's the biggest podcast in the world, so people are more than willing to give him that amount of time, which is insane. But you wouldn't get on the radio.
So some extreme philosophy there.
Extreme philosophy. I love it, Logan. Thank you.
Yeah,
there's another word for it,
amazing.
But
They're a brilliant answer. And I'm actually going to remember that for the rest of my life. That's drilled in there. That's engraved on my brain.
Scribble it down. Put a poster up on your wall there.
It'll be up there. You can't see it there. Do you know it here?
Oh, just there, just beside the Nirvana. Yeah, perfect.
Exactly. Great! You could see it was Nirvana.
I could see Nirvana. That was the first thing I spotted. Yeah.
Brilliant. And now for my very last question.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for this one.
Oh God, I'm nervous.
I expect you'll answer it brilliantly, Ed.
Oh, the pressure. Go on.
I'm going to raise the tension here now. Look how slow I'm going to do this.
I'm going to try to get the escape out this window. Go on.
For anyone who wants to start a podcast or wants to get into radio, or would like to get into anything that you do, you do, what tips would you have for them? And can you give reasons why what kind of things they should do to get on the radio track?
Well, I'll tell you the most important thing. And this is something that I think, because whenever I've spoken about this before, I've said this and people have gone, oh, when you're trying to get into radio or podcasts, it may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised by how many people miss this one, is that, say, for example, if you're a filmmaker or you're a comedian or you're a writer, there's no point even trying to write if you haven't read.
It's true.
If you want to be a writer, you're going to have to see what's happened before, what's happening now, and where things are going to go in the future. You have to be an avid reader, I would imagine. And I'm not an author, but if you are planning on being an author, being a good reader is tantamount. If you're an artist, you would have had to have seen the art of other people. So it's the same as in radio. You simply have to listen to loads of radio. Listen to the radio that you do listen to every day, but listen to it with different ears. Listen to why that song worked well after that song. The imaging, the stuff that goes on between the songs, the name of the presenter on the station. Just why do they have it so whooshy? Why is it so quick and fast? What are they trying to? What's the atmosphere? What the attitude of the presenter? Why is he speaking to me like that? Well, I really get drilled down into what you're listening to, because radio can be very passive, as I said before. You can just listen to it, it'll flow through your ear holes and out the other side, and sometimes it doesn't stick. Sometimes it does. But it's because the nature of the show is that, of any radio show, is that they're back again to do it the next day. There's another song coming down the right. So, you're not there to stick and stand around and analyze it, but do listen to radio properly, not just Irish radio. Listen to English radio. Some of the best radio in the world is coming out, out of England. Australian radio has always been a world leader for specifically duos and joint breakfast teams. They're just unbelievable. These people are listened to by 10, 15 million people. They're as much celebrities over there as movie stars. Like, Australian radio has always been, since I've started, a real world leader in innovation. So this is something that I would recommend to anyone. You have to listen to the radio. And same with podcasts. You have to listen to loads of podcasts and listen to them with real concentration and focus and see, okay, and it's not just the stuff you like, but why didn't I like that podcast? What was it about that podcast I did not like? Did it go on too long? Was there too much imagery? Was the interviewer boring? Were the questions too drawn out? Could it have been 20 minutes instead of 35 minutes? So these are you got to start thinking and listening to things with that very critical and, I suppose, analytical mind for a while. And then you're going to see what's out there. And again, analyze the radio presenters or the podcast presenters that you like and the ones that annoy you. And then after doing all of that, it sounds counterintuitive. You've got to see where you fit in and what difference you're going to bring to all the voices that are out there. With podcasts now, there are so many voices. You're in competition with so many different voices that people can get and access at the press of a button. Radio is competitive enough, but now with podcasts, and I say this because I've added it to the to the hordes that are doing it. But you got to think, what isn't being catered for? What isn't being, what subjects, what approach aren't being tackled here? And it could be something as simple as a friend of mine has a podcast based around carvery lunches. Now, it's brilliant, but you wouldn't think, oh, there aren't enough carvery lunch podcasts out there. But it's an excuse for them to go out, have a carvery lunch, give it a review, and that's just the kind of what they call a MacGuffin. It's then an excuse for them, her and her dear pal, who's hilarious as well, to have a bit of crack. So that is something that they come up with themselves, and it's working really, really well. So listen to what's out there. Again, with podcasts, there are a lot of them, but listen to the ones that are the most successful. Look at the charts, top 3. Why is that one there? Why is that top 3? Why is Joe Rogan so successful? You don't have to like him, but why is he so successful? Listen to Radiolab is one of my favorite podcast publishing houses. What they do with the way they edit the podcast is absolutely mind-blowing. The soundscaping that goes on, the layering of the voices, like it goes against everything that you're ever told, where the narrator will be talking and you'll hear the interviewee underneath them still talking. You're going, but the way they then bring up that interviewee just the perfect time when he finishes, and it's just beautiful to listen to. So there's a lot of very innovative stuff going on out there, but just listen. You've got to listen to see what's out there. Go back and listen to maybe some of the stuff that was going on before, listen to what's on the radio at the moment with a real keen ear. And that is, I think, the best advice I can give to anyone who wants to get into the business. See where it's going to technology wise. Is AI going to have an impact? Not just yet, I don't think. Why do people listen to the radio? Why do Irish people in particular have such a unique, intimate, and very special relationship with the radio? Because radio is company. It's company there at the most vulnerable times of your day, when you're just waking up, when you're just going to bed, when you're in the car and you're upset about going to work, or you've had a rough day, or you've had a great day, and you throw on the radio. There's Ian Dempsey to wake you up with a big warm smile and an audio hug. You're having a bad day, there's Dermot and Dave then to cheer you up with a bit of nonsense that they have on their show, or an incisive interview. And then you want to catch up on the world news, there's Matt Cooper's there for you. So that's what the great relationship that radio can provide to people. It's great company. It's there to entertain and inform. And I think that understanding that relationship and that connection that radio and podcasts have, as we said, it's a little different for both, but what you're doing, the essence of both, is establishing a connection with your listener, be it 1 or 5,000 or 50 or 500,000, doesn't matter. It's just building, first of all, establishing and maintaining that connection with your listener. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to sustain those ears and that loyalty? It's a lot to take in there, but that would be my advice.
So I would definitely listen to that voice. I listen to podcasts all the time,
Good, yeah.
and I listen to the radio every single night. So,
Yeah,
and it does work. It does work.
you
And
have to, yeah.
I have to say something now. This is now going to be very mad. You were saying about AI there, and I remembered something.
Okay.
Spotify have put something in beta.
I've listened to it. I know what you're going to say, the DJ guy.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
DJ thing. What do
yeah.
you think of that?
I tried it, yeah. It's, I think what's happening there, once you know it's fake,
It's
it,
not the same.
it's not, it's really, and I think, it's very instructive. It's great that you brought that up, actually. I tried it there last week, and he had my voice, and he was saying, in and around the right things. Oh, you like the. Now my choices were so random because of the podcast. I've had to listen to so many random different bands that I wouldn't normally. The choices he was coming up with, like for Niall Horan, with a load of Eagles. He goes, "Oh, I can see you. I can tell you're a massive fan of the Eagles. So why don't we start with this classic from their 1974 album, Hotel California?" I was like, "Oh, I don't need this guy." There's a thing called Uncanny Valley. I don't know if
Oh yeah.
yeah. So when they use this initially. I don't need to explain it to you, of course, but for anyone that might be listening who doesn't, that when they used CGI humans and the Polar Express, for example, you may be too young to remember this film, and they got it as close as they could to real human faces and eyes and smiles. It was Tom Hanks and Christopher Columbus directed. They had all the dots on them, and they spent hundreds of millions getting it all right, and it looked from a distance like a real man on a train, and they're going through the snow, fair dues. But just at that moment when they're trying, and your body and your brain naturally is, for the want of a better word, revulsed by what you're seeing, because it doesn't feel right or natural, and you're repelled by it to the point where you go, "Oh, this feels a little squeezy. It feels a little,
Yeah.
I feel a little greasy."
Actually, Uncanny Valley
Yeah,
is something that comes up a lot actually in my school, because a
yeah,
lot of people say, "Oh, it was very like Uncanny Valley." The thing is that Uncanny Valley is mentally triggering.
yeah.
In the back of your mind, when you see something like Uncanny Valley, like the Polar Express, if you
Mm.
look up at it up close, it's like it sticks.
Yeah, it
It's
just doesn't feel right or natural, and then that will put you off. So
yeah,
you can't have that with a podcast or a radio show. You're
yeah.
better off just listening to. So I think that the difference, people have been saying to me for years, "Oh, Spotify, this is Spotify's attempt at killing radio, essentially, isn't it?" So I think the radio still is as strong as it was 10, 15 years ago. So Spotify still hasn't laid a glove on radio. And the reason being is, fair enough, you can listen to a playlist of pre-chosen algorithmic songs, and that's all great. And I love Spotify. It's great for my job. It's
Oh,
great to
it's
throw it
amazing.
on. I love it. But at the same time, the human connection, again, going back to this connection, there is no connection between Spotify and this list.
It's actually who anybody who hasn't heard. Like I only when so what happened was one time. This is how I found out about it. My dad, I was at Bloom,
Mm.
and my dad lent me his phone so I could listen to some Spotify for a second. And I misclicked the DJ thing, and I heard it for a second, and it's AI DJ. Just for anybody who doesn't know, it's an AI DJ on Spotify mobile,
What's
not
his
on
name again?
desktop.
Did you get the same name? He gave himself a name.
I don't think I got a name because I
Yeah,
heard like 2 seconds, and he was like, um, he nearly had this rappy voice.
yeah, that's true.
Obviously, it went. It was my dad listens to a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So it got completely wrong. And I listened to the first 2 seconds and I was like, yo, this is a new track. And I went, no.
yeah.
Because I went on to the song that I actually meant to listen to and I went, wow, that's mad. It's not that nice to listen to.
So there you go. That's exactly it. I just don't think
It's
that
crazy to
that
listen to.
fakeness, that insincerity, because it's a robot, obviously. But if you go back to, not to get too deep on it again, I'll finish with this now because I know you've got to go. But in the 80s and 90s, there was this thing, this mid-Atlantic voice, in the 70s as well, would have come into radio in Ireland and in the UK, and it came from the States, really. So they just called it this mid-Atlantic voice where, "Hey, you're doing? Welcome to the show. It's Ed Smith here with you all the way till 5 o'clock in the afternoon."
Oh
So
yeah.
all this kind of like, and I won't name any names, but it became like, I can actually. Tony Blackburn, for example. in England. He's still going, actually. And he would have been this kind of cheesy kind of fake guy. And then they were all the mass, they were all the rage. And then Radio 2 got taken over by a guy called Matthew Bannister in the 90s. And he absolutely, or Radio 1, I should say, got rid of all of them. Because there was this comedy sketch called Smashy and Nicey on the Harry Enfield show with Harry Enfield and Paul, what's his name? Paul Whitehouse. And they took the mick out of these cheesy DJs. Oh, I do a lot of charity work. Like, so they replaced their T's with D's. And it really just undermined and highlighted how fake and false these people were, and how people wanted sincerity and something genuine. So all these regional voices started coming in. They sounded like the people that were listening to the shows. So I think what has happened here with this, they're trying to kind of recreate that connection with a fake kind of friendly guy. They've obviously done all the research and the algorithms, and they've composited this voice that sounds warm, friendly, engaging, a little cool, a little street. And all the parts are there, but the only thing they're missing is the heart, and I can't see it working ever.
There's no passion. It's like, I would advise, if you would like to, if you're into music, if you're into the radio, for experimental reasons only, you should maybe try the Spotify DJ just to see.
Oh, it's definitely worth listening. So it's interesting.
It is.
Yeah, it
is.
It
is because it's interesting to hear. It's like, there's another thing that Stephen Daly told me about called I think it's there. I forget the name, but it's on long wave.
Yeah.
That it could just be white noise, and then just randomly there's a sting or a piece of music played, and then it just, a robot starts reading a load of numbers.
Oh my God.
And then just cuts off.
Yeah.
It's creepy. Apparently, it's really.
There you go.
Really,
yeah. So I mean, like,
apparently it's really, really creepy, but it's really fascinating as well, because they go to like bases in different countries. And they're used for military as well. So it's very interesting how radio can be used. But I would advise, if you're into the radio, definitely listen to Spotify DJ.
Just try it. And see what you think.
Let me know, or Ed know, what do you think of it? Because it's actually, I'm kind of intrigued now about it. Because I think it's funny you brought up Uncanny Valley regarding Spotify DJ. But no, I'm going to end it on that, because I was going to blab a lot more on that. But is there anything else you'd like to say?
That's it, Logan. I want to say, listen, I'm a big fan of yours. What you're doing at such a young age is so impressive. And I really admire your dedication. You're doing it in all the right ways. You're obviously putting a lot of work into it. You're working on your delivery, your research, your approach, and you seem already, it's frightening at the age of 11 how comfortable you are behind the mic and talking to people. And it's been a real pleasure and genuinely enjoyable experience talking to you, and your future is absolutely massive, and just to stick with it. Just don't take my job. Just don't take my job.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's been brilliant talking to you two, and I've talked about some very interesting things that I would never usually talk about to an interviewee. So I have to thank you for that. And
thank you,
also
Logan.
To the listener who's watching at the moment, thank you so much for watching this Logan Sounds Off video. So goodbye, Ed.
Logan, good luck, and I'll see you in the future.
Goodbye.
Good luck.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Logan Sounds Off. You can follow me on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Logan Sounds Off. And don't forget to subscribe and not miss any more cool episodes. Bye, guys.